Welcome back, fellas, and thank you again for tuning in to Feed the Dark podcast. I have a very special guest here with me today to talk about a very special show.
How are you?
Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, name's David Graham. I'm an artist. Not a successful one at that, unfortunately, but...
Who is?
Yeah, exactly. We deal. But, good friend of, Evan's figured come on, give a discussion.
We're talking about Channel Zero, which is, it's a TV show that...
It basically had to be one of the best horror shows on TV for a brief while. Like I know there's been horror shows, but this was the definitive, true as horror show.
Absolutely, and because of that, I just wanted to thank you. You're one of two people who really forced me to watch this show, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
Because the show didn't get much praise as it did. It wasn't publicized. No one knew about it because even to this day, I mention it and no one knows what it was. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel, which, if you watch the Sci-Fi Channel, what is that known for? They're extremely shitty movies.
With a direct to fucking VHS.
Except for Sharknado, but
and Battlestar Galactica, but that was a while ago at this point.
But literally everything else on there, I understand what they're trying to do, with their camp horror, but it's still so unwatchable.
Yeah, no, that's why this probably deterred some people from seeing it. But no, I agree. I've had the same experience with many horror fans because I hang out with a lot of horror fans. It's very rare that people really know what I'm talking about unless one of my friends has introduced them or unless I've physically forced them down to make them watch it.
Yeah.
So it's highly unfortunate. And relating to that, we should say that it got canceled after the fourth season, which is a damn shame.
Yeah, because that was a good season. It took the second season, well, mainly the third. The second season really took the footing of getting emotionally aspects to it, where it touches on human horror themes. But then third season definitely hit, and fourth season they got more prolific, and then just canceled.
Yeah, I mean the fourth season, we'll get into this more, but that actually had my personal favorite ending. I know you prefer season 3, is that correct?
I like all the seasons. They're all good, but when it came to consistency of just staying good and not crazy, it was the third season.
Okay, that's fair. I have a little bit different opinion on that, but I will say that whatever negative thing I have to say about each season, once we really get into this, I like every season. Even the bad parts that we'll discuss and the problems I have are more just minor qualms. Actually, with the exception of the ending of season 2, but mostly they're minor qualms, and I would recommend every season as a standalone story for pretty much to any fan of horror out there. I mean, this is the worst season of Channel Zero is better than probably 95% of horror TV that I've seen in my entire life.
Basically, even when they're at their worst, they're still good compared to what has been out in recent years.
Yeah. So I guess we should start out on that note with Candle Cove.
Yeah.
So, So would you like to...
So with Candle Cove, which was the beginning of all of this, because it was the first season, no one knew what they were expecting. Literally from the first opening scene where the main character is in an interview, and it just escalates. It's a creepy vibe to begin with, which is just so... That's what the show definitely encapsulates, or if that's the word. It's
captures, or
it's the aesthetics, the unnerving feeling, literally from the first scene of the beginning of the first episode. It was just all right, this is something different, and then the whole season, from the characters, the puppets they use, the whole theme was just phenomenal. And
the first scene, I still remember vividly watching those first few minutes and being what in the hell am I watching? Because I don't scare easy, quote that I steal from Stephen King all the time, but it's true, I don't. It takes a lot to scare me, and just freak me out in the first 2 minutes of watching it. I mean, I was all right, here we go.
It's this show, it's scary not because it's pop scary, jump scare, it's scary, unnerving, it's creepy, it's just unsettling scary, where it's just all right, I feel uncomfortable, and that takes a lot when it comes to especially for a TV show, because you expect these out of movies, as movies are allowed to get away with a lot, but for a TV show, it's just like, oh, okay, that's...
No, absolutely. I actually mentioned this on my first episode when I reviewed Carrie and Comfort. Because that is an incredibly long novel, and I kind of said how I was so impressed that was able to scare me because, I mean, I have no problems with epics. I mean, The Odyssey is one of my favorite works of literature, and Paradise Lost and all that. But in terms of horror, similarly to TV shows, I feel like I have this same problem. When it becomes that long, I mean, I'll be invested. Like, for instance, in It, I like all of It, mostly, but it's not that it scares me. It takes like a true special work to be either a full season or like 1,000-page long novel to actually have me creeped out the whole time. And Channel Zero did that for me. So
yeah, like because Channel Zero is that creepy show where it's just like it's just so beautifully done, being what it is, and then but then you have like the Black Mirror of anthology shows where it's just like it's not scary, it's more like upsetting.
Yeah,
like it's emotional, but like at least with Channel Zero, it's unsettling, it's creepy, and it can be emotional. Like mainly,
also totally agree with what you said about Black Mirror as well.
Like the theme, like each season has the theme. Like for Candle Cove, the main character is dealing with not returning to his hometown. He's dealing with the death of his brother, the murders in his town. Like he grew up and he's still dealing with these pains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the things that impressed me most about this season was the whole theme of grief, and it's also it leads into another question I wanted to ask you about because how that was completely absent from the short story that it was based off of. In fact, all the characters and everything else was totally absent. So how do you feel about that?
So it's great how the show is able to take a few paragraph story and take liberties and turn it into something really good, because a lot of times when you're given source material like the recent Umbrella Academy TV show on Netflix, the source material was actually amazing, but the show was absolutely terrible. Like he used nothing from the comic, and that's the thing. He was given so much material, but the show failed. This, however, you're given such little information, and you're given so little, but you make a lot out of it. And this is the one time you're taking liberties and you're using it properly. Yeah,
like the twist at the end of the short story, not to give anything away, it's revealed in the first episode of Candle Cove, and then they kind of just jump off from there. So it's really
that worked for this season. Unfortunately, when we get to it, didn't really work for the second season.
Okay, so because I don't want to spoil Candle Cove, only because normally I would kind of get into it a little bit more with the ending.
Also, if you want to read the story, Candle Cove, it's written by Chris Straub.
Oh, yes, we didn't even mention. Yes. My apologies. Okay. These are all based on creepypasta stories.
Yes, and if you didn't know, creepypastas are internet horror stories, which a lot of them are truly, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Which it's unfortunate that modern TV and movies don't really use off of these, because people who write these are so creative, and it's a gold mine, and they need more praise than they get, because you can make so much out of these, like Channel Zero did. Like, you had the source material, you ran with it, you got more creative with it, and then you created such a unique experience of a TV show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I feel like the transition between the...
Yeah, now, it was cool because, like you said, they spoiled the book, the short story, in the first season, in the first episode. So how do you make more out of the season? You add things, like that one character, Miss Booth, which, not to spoil anything, she actually takes upon a Jesus-like allegory, which is always frightening. Like, religion horror can always be frightening when done, good. And then, they definitely added a lot. Like, the scenery, the TV show, they added these disgusting monsters that are just like...
Oh, yeah, they had they have a contortionist later on in later seasons, but they also had a contortionist at the end of the last episode of season 1.
I remember they had the tooth monster and then the...
Oh, okay. Actually, never mind. I changed my...
Contortionist was third season.
No, it was also the fourth when they had...
Third and fourth. That same Contortionist in third season.
Oh, I thought it was the first.
He was the same actor in the fourth season.
Okay, I could be wrong about that. I'm changing my stance on not spoiling Candle Cove, because I just remember that I did want to discuss a little bit the ending. So if you haven't seen the show, please tune out now and come back, because the only reason why I initially didn't want to spoil it is because so few people that are horror lovers have, and I feel like they deserve to experience this firsthand. But I'm going to spoil this in 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're in spoiler territory. So what did you think about the ending for the first season?
It's been some time.
Okay.
Like I had a recap because I don't have any streaming services, so I couldn't rewatch any of them.
Yeah, I
but,
stole someone else's Shudder account, so.
Yeah, I might have to do that now. Get a Shudder. I think it's the one season that has like an actual happy ending, even though the main character sacrifices himself. But now there's this transition where, with this curse of the Candle Cove, you have the light and the dark, where now his twin, the evil entity, still exists, but now that he's dead, the main character, he's able to prevent the situation from really ever happening again. So, like, at least his daughter gets to live a happy life, unfortunately without her father, but he could at least still protect her from the other realm. Which, honestly, I feel like that's the one, like, happy thing, because I think every other season kind of doesn't have. Maybe this fourth season has. I think
the fourth one has a much even happier than this one. But
like the other two have like moderate to like they're good, like they're decent, they're like happy for some people, but the characters you were rooting for, they're really not that happy for.
Okay, so I actually didn't mind the tone of how it ended. I had, I guess, 2 or 3 major problems with it. One may just be a personal preference kind of thing, because I personally wasn't a fan of how it went into the psychic boy territory of the last episode or episode and a half, and how that was everything behind it. I mean, it did kind of get, fantastical with how the show came on, and, it was all static, and so they kind of had to do something. For me, I didn't like how that was just his imagination as a boy, especially when they were building up a teacher to, like, have all the props in her house. I thought they could have done something a little more interesting. But, yeah.
That's the thing. They could have done more, but as we know, first season of every show always needs the footing. And because they're so limited between the source material they're given and they decided to do 6 episodes or less, which honestly is a great thing to do.
No, I think the amount of episodes is perfect.
Because when we talk about it later with American Horror Story, we all know the formula starts off somewhat strong. The middle of the season is like garbage. Right. Then it picks up for 2 episodes, and then the ending is always absolutely disappointing. So at least with this show, give us 6 episodes, tell the story, you're done, move on to a different story.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. The next thing I wanted to ask you about before we get on to a little bit deeper into the themes. So one of my favorite image from the entire series overall is the Tooth Monster. Although, I know you said it's been a bit since you watched it, so I don't want to press you too hard on this, but I don't really feel like the Tooth Monster came into play as much as I wanted. Like, I love the idea, the look, and everything. I think was my favorite thing about the show. But yeah, I didn't feel like it really tied into much.
I feel like Tooth Monster, as great Tooth Monster was for adding the creep factor, it was kind of unnecessary, because I feel like they just added it in, because you already had the person dressed as one of the puppets walking around kidnapping kids, killing people. Like, you had that. I guess they just wanted to up the ante of making this the surreal horror it was, and the Tooth Monster, which they sure as hell did, because I think about the scene of him eating teeth, and he is teeth.
Oh yeah, no, I don't even want this to be cut out of a show. I just wish they found a better way to,
Like, if they found a better way to just bring it in, like, maybe make it part of the show, like the Candle Cove cartoon show, like, make it part of that, instead of just throwing in this creature. It's like, oh, hey, here we go. Here's a Tooth Monster.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Okay, so once again, those are only minor complaints, but, so before we move on to season 2, just one more thing I really wanted to talk about, unless you had anything to add, was just, the overall theme of grief, I thought, to me, was very mature and incredibly impressive, especially for a horror TV show on its first season. And they usually, I thought it was just, there have been shows that have tackled grief before, but not in this kind of way.
Yeah, because like they start you off where it's just like the first episode, he's a psychologist, right? He's a child psychologist. Like he's interviewed, and they bring up his past, and then that whole, at least it's built up like, oh hey, you right now know he has problems, but then the whole season is just like, now he has to deal with this, which not many, like, if you deal with grief in your life, a lot of times people have different ways of dealing with grief. This episode, the season showed you that, no, he has to face this head on, and it's not going to be good. Like, I think it could be contrived as, like, a healing process, to where it's just like,
I can see that with the ending, actually. Yeah.
Actually, when you think of all 4 seasons, because now I'm thinking about it, all 4 seasons deal with grief and hurt in some kind of way. This season deals with the grief of him losing a family member that he watched die, and then in a town where people were murdered, he has to come to terms with that, and then he comes back, and it's just not getting any better. So, like, was he able to heal from this?
Yeah, and I feel like that definitely seeps into the atmosphere of the entire town as well, because most people in this town lost someone, and you could kind of just feel that just by watching the setting, which I thought was...
I feel like the town is kind of like Derry in It.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's just like... Or Amityville, with Amityville Horror, it's just like, things happened, they don't want to acknowledge it. So, that's why here, he has to come back. He never wanted to acknowledge it, but now... things are happening and he has to. So a lot of times I think the season was just like, oh, you're going to have to face your grief. Like, you're going to have to heal from it. You have to figure out a way, because you won't move on. Because as you see in the first episode, he still was not. Like, he's dreaming about it. He can't recover from it. So this was a good season. With the season, I noticed it has the themes of daylight horror, which was a big deal when Midsommar came out.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, that whole season basically took place during the day, which gives it definitely, more horror should be like that, where it's just, daytime horror.
No, I agree, because that kind of eliminates the whole, spooky things only happen when the lights go out. And this is no, not even then.
Because, this season was perfect scary-wise, because it dealt with child murder, tricking children into killing, and... dying, and then it all took place in the daylight, because everyone has the misconception bad things can happen at night, but bad things can happen all times of the day.
Yeah, plus you have a creepy TV show happening. I think it was, unless I'm missing a scene, it was exclusively during the daytime when the children were watching it, unless I'm forgetting something. But
it was always during the day. And then it was the area, which we'll get to each season. The areas make a big impact of how it affects the scary factor of it. So this season took place in a small town, open country area, which I don't know, we're not from small towns, we're from suburbs of the city, but this one, small town horror is obviously Children of the Corn and things like that are just always inherently scary, but they didn't make it hicky small town, they just made it average farming small town, which was also they didn't use the typical hillbillies and...
No, I think that choice really added to the realism aspect to it.
Because that's what the show is good at. Nothing is hokey, nothing is campy. It's just literally flat there. You can relate to it. You can see it, you can relate to it, and that's what makes it terrifying.
No, I totally agree. I freaking love this season. It's it's one of my favorite seasons of television. Even if I have a few problems with it, I still very strongly recommend it. So
even when it's issues, it's still good for what it is. Yeah. You can get past the issues because there's so many other great qualities to it rather than the bad qualities.
Yeah. So I think with that, we should move on to season 2 because we have so much more to talk about. Yeah. So this is No End House.
If you want to look it up, it's by Brian Russell.
Yes. As with every season here, the creepypasta story is just so different than the actual season. But I would recommend, pretty much... for all 4 seasons and all 4 stories, I'd recommend reading all of them and I'd recommend watching all of them because I think they're both fascinating in their own ways. But this one, I should point out that this story isn't done because this author adds pages, every couple years to his story. So at this moment in time, there are only 3 pages or 3 chapters, and it's kind of on not even a cliffhanger, and it just kind of stops. So just a heads up for that. But.
Yeah, let me just say it. This season, it started out very strong. That first episode, the very first scene where the one character is running out of the house, totally perfect. She's in a suburbs, and then she's running to the house. That whole sequence is just absolutely amazing. Scenery-wise, it sets up the whole show perfectly because... each season, the beginnings of the first episode, the beginning opening scenes, are what sells the show.
I actually have a quick question before you go on. Did this come out? Do you know if this came out before It Follows, or because I feel like those intros are relatively similar.
The second season definitely has the It Follows vibe, but first season, I don't know. I should have did my research on that.
No, it's mostly only for the second season because the intro you're explaining right now, and I kind of
and then like you see the character she's running, and then she has written on her arm, "This isn't real," and then because you don't know what you're expecting, and then the whole season starts. But like aesthetically, shot wise, like perfect. Like this show offers like movie quality where like the scenes set up are just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean with the TV show budget, it's very impressive.
Yeah, especially for sci-fi.
Yeah, for a sci-fi TV show budget, Jesus Christ.
You've seen the movies they're willing to make. Like,
yeah, I don't know how they managed to get the money for this, but I'm incredibly grateful that we did.
But it's also funny to note that if you read the story and then watch the show, as the story goes, each room in the No End House progressively gets scarier. In the short story, the first room is a really shitty done haunted house where it's like plastic bats.
Yeah.
But in the show, the first room is actually disturbing, like very disturbing.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, okay, like you're gonna leave. Like if you don't like this stuff, you're gonna leave. But like it makes you personally think as you're watching this first episode, how long could I last in the No End House?
One room. I would last.
That's all it took for you?
If I saw my, what they do in the first room, I'd be like, all right, well, that was fun.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm going to leave.
It's like, granted, I scare easily when I go to haunted houses. Seeing as how I've worked in them for years, I still get scared, but...
Oh, no, I'm totally different in haunted houses than with movies. So.
So like, as I'm watching this, I'm like, maybe I could get to each room, but then as you see, it's getting more emotional. Like, besides it's getting more scary, you get to the second to last room, it is super emotional, and that's what this season was good at. They took the grief factor, really up the ante on that one.
Yeah, and I think that actually worked to their advantage in the first, not to jump the gun, but in the first 3 or 4 episodes, I think that made it more horrifying.
Yeah.
I don't like where it went, but in the first 3 or 4 episodes, I think the addition of, that whole theme of grief and that just added to make everything like so much more just mean in the haunted house, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like you shouldn't be able to do that. But I do agree how the rooms do get progressively scarier, but the TV show kind of really ups the ante in a major way.
The short story, obviously very graphic, very it's excellent. The first short story for it is very excellent because it's vivid. I understand they can get away with a lot more than a TV show could, but at least for the adaptation, they didn't go gory. They went full on emotional because now you have to deal with the main character's grief, and then you have to deal with her best friend's grief, and then everyone else who enters this house. You have several different subplots where you're dealing with their lives.
Yeah, so for a short story, it kind of expands as it goes on, but it just starts out with one man walking through this house, and the TV show has a group of people, so we do a little bit, we're able to do different things with it.
The TV show actually, it's cool that they use the use of social media to get people to come to this, and then you're seeing, who's lasting in this, and then it turns out they're now stuck in this really terrible universe where they're dealing with this pain forever. And then they introduced the cannibalism theme, which definitely upped the ante on that one, where it was just like, okay, I understand what you're trying to go for now, but now you're getting to a new territory of
Yeah, that's another thing that... all right, I'll let you finish. Don't go on.
Yeah, no, unfortunately for this season, it started out good, but because they, I guess, had to think of stuff to do, it just really ran its course. Yeah,
so usually I think 6 episodes. It's not that long, and I know I went on a whole rant before about how it's impressive if you keep me scared throughout the whole thing. I think for me this season, I think it would have been better if it was 4 episodes or something because it actually
4
didn't.
Episodes,
it didn't scare me throughout the whole thing.
Because when I show No End House to people, they say the first episode is enough.
Yeah, the first episode is awesome.
Yeah, first episode is amazing, but then everything else after that, it's just all right, we get it. You're in this Eldridge universe. You're stuck now, and now people are eating memories. You're running out of memories. I get it. You tried, but
I did like the next couple episodes actually, but I think at some point it tipped from being upping the ante of being terrifying and upping the stakes to just kind of meandering off into more of an emotional take on it, which would be fine if it was a different kind of show.
Yeah.
But for this sort of show and how it was first introduced, I feel like it got a little soft.
Yeah, because like those first few episodes, like, you know, you're dealing with how she's dealing with the death of her dad.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, did he commit, spoiler alert, like, did he commit suicide? Why did he die? Like, you're really invested in this poor girl's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then her friend, who they never explain why she's dealing with her pain, like what she has.
Yeah, it's
but
a bit
like,
vague. Yeah.
So you're dealing with her vague pain. And then like the other two friends, like, yeah, you dealt with their pain, but like then it just falls off because who really cares? But like the main two, like you're invested, but then again, it just went, like they just kept adding stuff in.
Well, also with the father, I mean, when he's first introduced, he's kind of like a monster, and they have, you know, the creepy music playing, and he's acting very strange. But then as it goes on, it kind of makes you want to sympathize with the house creation of a father, which I personally think is a terrible mistake. I think it should not have been that at all. I think they should have kept her sympathizing with the father figure, but the fact that he felt bad and he was like, "Oh, I'll never be your true father, and I'm going to sacrifice myself." We already said spoilers, so
yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was a bit
like because you. That's the thing. You had this great story, but then you kept going.
Yeah.
Which I understand you need to fill, but you know if you could have found better ways to do it, cool. But still, solid season. Not the best of all of them, but it's still like a solid season.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm just ragging on it hard because it's in such a great TV series. I'd still recommend this to most fans of horror, obviously with a bit of a caveat. But
it's the quickest binge you can do.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So even if you end up hating all 4 seasons, you didn't waste that much time because it literally 4 seasons, 6. I think Butcher's Block has less episodes.
Oh, does it? Yeah.
I think, but like each season, 4 seasons, 6 episodes, you're like done in a day. If you really 2 days at best.
Yeah, if you dedicate some time.
Yeah, it takes no time out of your day to binge it.
So now this one. And unless you had anything else to add for No End House before we move on. Okay, so now this season is your personal favorite.
Butcher's Block.
Butcher's Block.
Butcher's Block is absolutely like a beautiful season. It has everything because it stayed consistent with a story. It was creepy. It was beautifully, like aesthetic-wise, it was perfect because you had the surreal aspect of it. You had cannibalism, body horror to it. You had Italian horror to it. Like, it was just the, like, season.
Yeah, this was by far the most disgusting season.
Oh, my God.
I mean, in a good way, but it was
Now, if you want to read it, it's Search and Rescue Woods by Kerry Hammond, but be aware that the story the show is loosely based off it. This season took a lot of liberties.
Oh, a ton. But this is actually my favorite short story out of all 4, personally. It's very long, but what's that?
I actually didn't read this story.
Oh, okay, so it's the longest one, and the author has noted that he's actually going to make it into a novel.
Okay.
The only thing it really has in common is that there is a door in the woods. And
the stairs.
The stairs. Oh, excuse me. The stairs and the doors. That's it. But everything else is completely different. I mean, it has nothing of the same. It's really not like. It's fantastical vaguely, but this season goes like full throttle into that territory.
Because you literally have all the horror tropes. That's how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
You have all the tropes there. You have a scary Southern family. You have cannibalism. You have like the woods. You have everything you can think of. Yeah. Like it's the most surreal of that, and in the heart of it, it's dealing with mental illness, which a lot of people unfortunately are inflicted with.
Yeah, no, this actually has probably my favorite theme overall. Maybe not favorite, but I think it addresses the theme of it's the theme that it's focusing on with a more unique take than the other 3 seasons.
Yeah. So again, with this season, the opening of the episode, absolutely perfect. Like you had the creepy woods, you have music. I forget which movie it took from. It's one of the cannibal movies. I think it was Cannibal Holocaust or Ferox. It's one of those movies. So it's kind of like a hidden, like, what is it, Easter egg of what you're expecting.
Yeah.
And then as the characters walk in the woods, you see this little person in a hood and its figured face. What got me is the way that thing moved. You remember that, right? Like,
oh, yeah. It kind of hopped from side to side.
Yes, that did
crazy.
it for me.
Yeah.
I wasn't into that. So then that character dies, but then you see another character running, and you just see the stairs. You see the stairs, you see the door, like just aesthetically, because I'm all about aesthetics.
Yeah.
That's why, like, when I see like Lighthouse, Midsommar, as much shit as those movies get, aesthetically, those movies are just absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of my favorite movies.
Let's think, like, I'm liking the new art house horror trend. A lot of people aren't into it, but
I talked about this in a previous episode.
Fun.
A guy growing up in the 90s and early mid 2000s. I pretty much lived my whole life saying that to everyone who I ever talked to, like, oh man, if I was only born in this era of time, I would experience horror. Now, within the past like 5 years, I'm finally like in an era where I'm enjoying horror films, and I feel like we're taking them seriously thanks to A24 and Blumhouse and some other companies.
Yeah, like we're truly like, granted, we'll never get like the renaissance we had with the 80s slashers. Like, as shitty as they could be, they still, like, I'm watching the Friday the 13th series in full. They're good, but they're not that good. But it's a simple formula where it's just like, oh, here you go, murder. And that was the trend of the 80s, which it did the job.
Right.
Like, you had the Slumber Party Massacre, where, for its time, progressive because directed by a woman, and then you had plenty of slasher movies that you don't think are, like, there's some are problematic, some are progressive. That's your adaptation of it.
Right.
But still, like, you had a good... Like, so the 70s was good for art house horror. Like,
70s is my favorite era for horror.
You had Phantasm, which this season heavily took inspiration from. Phantasm, absolutely beautiful movie.
Yeah.
So, at least with the 70s, you had beautiful looking movies, like Rosemary's Baby, which was 70s, right?
Oh, no, it was 68, actually.
68.
It was almost, or no, it may have been 69. Whatever it was like on the cusp. It was almost the 70s. But we had Halloween, we had The Exorcist, we had The Omen.
Yeah.
For so many others
that
are escaping me.
End of 60s, 70s, you did have those, like, pretty looking movies. Even Stepford Wives.
Yeah, Jaws.
Pretty looking movie. All of them good. And then 80s came the gory slashers, which, again, also effective. Now, what we're getting is both. We can get the gory and we can get the beauty. Mm-hmm. And that's what this show was good with also. It's just that, for at least for TV viewing, we got both of those at the same time.
Absolutely.
And like with this season, it was just like, you had everything. You had truly disturbing, like, visuals. Like, even in the first episode, that one thing, licking the wall, and the girl felt it. Then the meat monster coming out of the stairs with the classical music.
Yeah. Now, that actually reminded me of a very Cronenberg type scare.
That's the thing, too. Like, you get the Cronenberg, but this season had Cronenberg and David Lynch all together.
Yeah. How
often can you combine those two together and have a fluent TV show?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was really a treat. Okay, so we'll talk about the ending in a bit, but before we get there, I mean, how do you think this really covered mental illness differently from other shows? Because I have my own opinions about this, and they're all positive, but I kind of want to hear your interpretation.
It showed, I liked how it had it in the family, that, like, it's a hereditary thing where you see the mother who went crazy. That one scene where the girl's flashbacking, you see the mother stabbing herself and she's making that noise.
Oh, yeah.
You get I actually got chills on that one because that was just like a gross scene to me. Mm-hmm. But you see how the two sisters, one is affected by it, the other one is trying to avoid it. You see how they're affected by the family's actions, and then you see towards the ending who recovered from it. Like, it's truly how you process. It's like Ted Bundy said, with trauma, people process it differently. So this show showed how each sister processed it and how they recovered or didn't recover from it, which makes you think, was the summer home, they call it, meeting the Peaches, was it a dream? Was it their way of... Was it part of their hereditary mental illness that they're dealing with? Or was it real? Like, how do you think about that? That's what the season is cool to think about. Like, did it happen? Were they thinking about it? Like, was it real? Was it real?
So I have one question to jump off of from here. So there's one TV show on Netflix that got a lot of flack. 13 Reasons Why. I didn't like it at all.
I haven't seen it.
It's kind of dog shit. But, so that got a lot of flack for being irresponsible and how it dealt with just teens who are dealing with self-harm and mental illness and suicidal thoughts, because they, for a lot of reasons, they like actually showed, self-harm, and they did pretty much everything that psychologists would tell you not to do for a show like this. Now this, I have a different opinion on it, and I think maybe I'm giving it too much of a leeway because it's horror, but there are scenes of the main character carving out pieces of herself, and that is like even more extreme than anything like that. And they are trying to address these points, and I feel, I kind of want to. I mean, I'm trying to work this through my own head as I'm saying this out loud. But do you think that's how it was presented was irresponsible, or do you think because it's horror, it was they're kind of because of a gore aspect thinking?
I feel like one point the gore aspect, because she's newly cannibalized. She's not ready to eat people, but she's hungry, so she's eating herself. But that could also be an allegory to, like, you're eating your pain, you're not taking care of it, or you're not aware of your pain and you don't know how to deal with it. So I guess because it's horror, they can get away with them being like, this is a way to talk about your pain. Like, this is how she's dealing with it. Like, self-harm is unfortunately not, it happens, but it's not the best way to do it. So, because the sister who is doing it is the one who is sick in the show. And so that's her way of, like, dealing with the pain.
No, I agree. I think it was a bit more responsible with how they dealt it here because of those reasons.
Again, I guess because it's horror, unlike 13 Reasons, where that's like a show that's saying, oh, we're this type of show, we're talking about illness, suicide.
Yeah, and to be clear, it was like TV-14 or something. It was directed towards that crowd, so it was,
No, this show did a good job showing that's like, like you show the main character how she's dealing with taking care of her sister, dealing with being in debt to student loans, fielding phone calls from her crazy mother at the insane asylum. Like, you're dealing with the emotional stress of that. Then you're dealing with the other sister who is sick and she's trying to medicate, she's trying to get better. And then you throw in these like other dimension cannibals, and it's just like, all right. So it's a lot to process in the season. But visually, again, they also use the daytime horror, because when they go into they go up to the stairs, they're in this like plantation. It's just like pretty looking plantation at that. Very Phantasm-ish because there's the marble floor and everything.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the Phantasm reference didn't even come to my mind before I talked to you, but now that you mention it, it's
there's like
incredibly obvious.
Because after watching Phantasm, it was just like, oh, Channel Zero definitely borrowed from this, because between the little person in the beginning throughout the show.
The tall man kind of had a similar-ish role in this. There was a character that kind of resembled that.
Yeah, all of it was just like...
Yeah, so I think we disagree on... the ending here. So you do like the ending here? Or?
The ending was satisfying. It was enough to where, again, spoilers, where like the sick girl got better, she was able to live her life. But unfortunately, the main character who did everything she could, who tried to avoid being her mother, became her mother. Yeah. Which is definitely realistic and heartbreaking. So I like that they were able to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I like it in concept. I guess, once again, this might just be a personal gripe. I feel like that switch happened a bit too dramatically, immediately, the switch between the two. And also, I feel like the end got a bit too over the top, just for me. I mean, I love the gore, and I love this Goria season, and visually it was crazy, and all the practical effects, and all that stuff. But just in terms of, like, it got too abstract for me to a point of where... it wasn't my cup of tea. No, like, I love that. Like, when she's giving birth in the woods, very Neon Demon-ish, like, love that shit. But I could see where you're coming from, where you had a strong season of just, like, subtle surreal horror, and then end episode just becomes this gory, like, fest. It becomes nuts. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about with Season 3? Because I know you love this season so much. Or was that kind of...
No, Season 3 is good. Like, I talked about what I could for that.
Okay, cool.
What about you? Do you have anything else to say?
No, it was just it was gross, and it made me uncomfortable. I really liked it, but it was
southern, like southern horror for some reason. Like the fact that they were a southern cannibalistic family, like because you have like you can get two extremes with the southern horror. You can get like the violent hillbillies, or you can get like the antebellum. We want the South should have won the war type southern people, and this is what I feel like. The second one is the scariest of the southern, where it's just like, And again, to the Southern viewers, no disrespect to you guys. Like, you guys are great. Don't
We
worry.
love you.
Yeah, everyone's great.
Yeah.
Like, but sometimes.
Yeah.
Depends on how you act. But
For sure.
with this show, the fact that they were the creepiest because they were these prim and proper, like, Southern Belle type family. And then there's just these monsters that were attacking the inner city, even making reference like, oh yeah, the people in Butcher's Block taste like shit because their diets and they smoke. Like, that's, I guess, like social commentary, but like it's funny too. Like,
That's
it's
true.
disturbing, it's funny, it's all together, like still good.
This conversation was actually inspiring me to rewatch this season because this is actually I watched all of them as I aired except for this one. This was the only one that I watched.
It on demand.
We didn't watch all of it though. We watched a few episodes and then I got tired because it was the AM. But this is the first time I watched it all the way through. So I feel like I should kind of, after sitting with it, I do want to revisit
and
it.
Rutger Hauer, rest in peace, is the main character. So
that is true.
yeah, so it's his it was like it's a good performance to see him in.
Yeah. Now, this was the hardest season for me to watch, but yeah, it definitely stuck with me more. So
it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was sensory. Like, it was a lot of emotional sensory overload to process.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, a lot of like visuals to deal with.
Okay, so I guess without any further additions to this, we should move on to the final season,
Dream Door.
Dream Door. So I didn't really love this the short story. I really liked the season,
Yeah.
but the short story I thought was a bit like too open. I don't. Did you read it or no?
Briefly, it was the hidden.
It was
the
a
short
very,
term is Hidden Door, but
yeah, Hidden Door, but it's a very extremely long title.
written by Charlotte Bywater. If you want to look it up.
And yeah, I mean, it was basically just like you found something in his attic, and it was kind of a person, and it was kind of vague. And he went outside, and that was it. But this season, I really liked, except I didn't even like it in the beginning. It took me a few episodes to totally get into.
So the beginning, this was the one season where at the beginning of the episode took a while because it was average. It was an average TV show. You see a couple who knew each other for years. They're married. They're having sex everywhere in the house. Like, it took a while to get to the intensity of what we're used to, which I guess was a nice change of pace. But then when they get to it, they get to it.
Yeah.
This was the slowest of the slow burns of the season, where like it took so long in the first episode to get to like.
It wasn't until the last scene of the first episode where they really get into any violence.
When she finally gets to the door, and then she sees Pretzel Jack, which is truly terrifying. I don't know if Tooth Monster or him take the cake on a...
For me, it's Tooth Monster, but he's very clearly the second. I mean, I love this design. I love the contortionist they hired to play him. And he just...
Like, he was
such a presence.
This was, like, the monster to put into, like, this season.
Yeah, I agree.
And then adding all the other monsters were good, but at some point became overkill.
Okay. I get why you would say that. I actually like the addition of the later monsters later on in the season.
The tall boy was good.
I enjoyed that a lot.
The little crayon monsters, no.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But all in that, like, I like that this was a season about relationships, because every other season dealt with, like, the first two seasons dealt with grief of someone dying. Third season dealt with mental illness. This one is actually dealing with, a somewhat about to fail relationship. And
gaslighting. A lot to do with gaslighting as well from multiple different characters. So that was...
Which was, like, it was good because you're feeling for this girl, because everyone, I'm sure, can relate to a time in their relationships where they felt the doubt, they felt cheating, or because of what their parents have dealt with, like what their parents brought to their childhoods, like infidelity. Like, it hit home, I'm sure, for, like, several people. But this was definitely the season for that. And it's good that these horror can bring, like, these elements of, like, real life situations, but can mask it with, like, monsters to help you, like, come to terms with everything.
No, it introduces these themes to an audience that otherwise may not have been exposed to them. So I feel like that's really interesting. So it wasn't necessarily a slow burn, but threw me off, even though that, I generally like a slow burn. Even though this may have been a bit harder because I had to wait, a week in between each episode. Yeah. But it was more so, I don't know. I think the story kind of changed halfway through, which is a story that I like more. In in the beginning, she had to. It was more so based on like whether she got angry if Pretzel Jack came into play, and while that was cool, it didn't necessarily scare me because it was the main character's fault. Not like
no,
it's a bad way of saying it, but I mean it was like you know nothing would happen unless she was emotionally involved in the horror, which didn't really make me fear for our main character. Later on, I did, which is when I started to like it more. But I think that's the main reason why.
The twists of that season, though.
Yeah.
I was very happy with those. Like, I wasn't expecting
same.
everything to unfold as it did. But then, like the twist, but then, like, the superpowers that they held, that kind of, like, lost it for me a little bit.
It was a bit X-Men-y. So you have to be a certain type of audience to really appreciate this type of story. Honestly, this took me, like, probably thinking back on it that I liked it more. So, but I totally understand where you're coming from. It gets very sci-fi way more so than the other ones and a bit Marvel-y, but I think it still retains a horror because, I mean, you still have so there's another character who has his own monster, and he has, like, a buzzsaw that he uses on, like, multiple people, and, I mean, while some may be portrayed as more action scenes, I think they're gory enough to where they're also horror.
Yeah.
And the
gore was really good that season.
And the gore just, I mean, it's really, like, for a couple scenes every now and then, the first three, but really in the last three, I think it really up it to a level that I was, I was very ecstatic about.
Again, like, still a strong season. Like, even when they're at their worst, it's still strong. Yeah,
so this wasn't, I'd have to think about what my favorite season is. This wasn't my favorite season, but it did personally have my favorite ending. And I mean, it was the happiest ending, but it wasn't because of that. It was just because I think it was the most insane when you had like everyone's monsters trying to. I thought that was
the battle.
The battle was really cool, and it felt a bit more level-headed. So with that, I guess we should kind of go into what our favorite season is and why.
Obviously, Butcher's Block.
Right.
Because of how I'm big on aesthetics. Mm-hmm. Like, so between the aesthetics of that, just overall, the whole season was just everything to it. Like, the scenery, the story, the characters, even though I grew to hate the main character. As much as I loved her in It Follows, she's a good actress, she's a good person, but I just started to hate her character towards the end.
That's fair.
I felt bad how it ended for her, but she became so unlikable at that point where I'm just like, all right, I get it. Like, it happened. Like, I get it.
I think my favorite season is probably season 1, even though I spent a lot of time explaining why I don't like the ending. I still think that has, for me, the strongest atmosphere and the slower building mystery I really enjoy. The TV show I think is incredibly creepy. The design of Tooth Monster is my favorite, even if it didn't really tie in. Although, once again, my favorite ending is season 4 just because of how bonkers it gets.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the individual seasons a lot and the themes and all of that, but I kind of wanted to get your interpretation on why this show stands out in your mind, especially in this time in horror specifically.
It offers something different because with horror, you have two types of horrors. Like, if you go to the theater, what are you going to see? Like, what is the mainstream going to see? Are they going to see Purge movies, like the constant Purge movies, or are they going to see the A24 movies? Like, they're going to see Hereditary or Midsommar.
Probably not A24.
Yeah, unfortunately, like, because both movies could be solid. But the thing is, I understand companies need to make money. So everyone's going to go see the Purge movies, or they're going to keep making Purge movies. Channel Zero, for a TV prod, offers something different. They offer, like, surrealism. They offer actual art to the forums. Like, kind of like, what else does that? I'm trying to think, like, kind of like how Hereditary, Midsommar, Lighthouse, The Witch all offered artsy takes on a new horror aspect. Meanwhile, like, but I understand with TV, everyone's going to tune into the American Horror Story. Yeah. Because it's campy, it's commercial, but also it's terrible. Like, they have, like, their political agenda that they always, like, force on is always one-sided. It's not scary. Like, they try too hard, but, like, I know you haven't seen later seasons, but I keep watching it. It's not good. It's just, I'm still going to watch it because, I hate myself. I'm an asshole. But
I'm kind of morbidly curious after talking to you. I do want to watch more. So I've seen the first 2 seasons.
Because the problem with American Horror Story is there's some good points in their seasons, but they're not good enough to save the season, which is the bad part.
Yeah.
Like the last season, the 80 season was absolutely atrocious because it started off so strong and then got so terrible. And that's the problem, is just that that's what TV is offering in the horror aspect. Like Netflix will give you good horror shows, but actual TV shows, there were people who can't afford streaming services, they're going to watch TV. This is what they're getting. And that's not fair to that because horror is such a broad aspect. Like there's so many different themes, and if you're limited, that's what you're stuck with. Like you wouldn't want to, what would you go see? Like if you wanted a horror TV show, what would you want out of it?
I guess kind of what Channel Zero kind of attempts to give me. I mean, different themes each season. Kind of an exploration on not just death, but on grief and on mental illness. And I mean, there's a plethora of topics you could cover. I mean, genuine scares that aren't just jump scares.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get into Haunted Hill House. I love that show, but this doesn't even really have too many jump scares, if any at all.
And it's good because it's an anthology show that's not connected. Sometimes those are fun, but then there's a lot of times you just want a non-connected, you just want a strict horror story. You don't want to be like, oh, does this connect back to this season, this and that? Like, you don't want to take time at 3 a.m. on YouTube to create a timeline for where everything happens.
Right, not everything has to be a cinematic universe.
Sometimes you just want a strict story in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of like how Creepshow is, where it's just like, oh, it's fun, it's a comic book. They're all separate. That's what this offers, where it's just like, it's by itself. It's its own contained story. You can enjoy it, and that's it. 6 episodes, you're done. Visually, it's great. Again, you deal with emotional things that you could relate to. You see sceneries where, like, you felt you've been at. Like, it's realistic, not being realistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, the characters and the setting feels real, but not necessarily what happens in the story. Yeah. But in order to be invested in what's happening, they should not feel like cartoon characters or just, cardboard cutouts.
Because the characters can be relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you get invested into any story regardless of the genre. But so I did see the first couple seasons of American Horror Story. I mean, the first one just reminded me of Gossip Girl plus some scares. It really didn't impress me. That was back when it was getting a lot of buzz for being this incredible horror TV show. The second season I didn't like because it threw like 40 different kind of scares and without really any direction.
They'll throw things in there like the alien subplot.
Yeah,
never gets brought up again. The Anne Frank storyline in the second season was cool. They ended that quickly.
Well, they also had like a clown, and they had there was like a lot of things.
They just keep every season they keep adding subplots that don't get resolved or they get resolved lazily.
Yeah, so I mean I find this a bit frustrating. Not that I continue it like you, but whenever I run into people, just, normies at parties, normies. Whenever I run into people who aren't really familiar with horror at parties, they kind of come up to me and are like, oh, so you would love American Horror Story, or you would love The Walking Dead. That kind of irks me a little bit.
Walking Dead, I stopped after the first season.
Yeah, I stopped that after the first couple. I've seen a couple episodes every now and then, and people are like, oh, you would love this, but I don't know. To me, it's just such like watered down. Even with the gore, it just.
That's the thing. It's like I get you're restricted because you're on TV, but you can do a lot with your restrictions. You can.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to do gore or nudity. You can do a lot more. Given like Channel Zero had no nudity, and even in the first 2 seasons, the gore was extremely limited. Mm-hmm. So you can still make an impactful horror show without having all the necessary things.
Yeah, I feel like, and I can't really speak too much to American Horror Story because I forgot about a lot of it. But at least The Walking Dead, I feel like that confused the two because that had, great zombie effects and excessive gore, which was nice.
Yeah.
But it kind of didn't have much else, and it kind of had like, I felt like I was reading some gossip magazine while.
Was there not enough like emotion? Could you not relate to the characters?
It's not that there was too much. It's not like there was enough emotion. It was that the emotion just seemed totally fake, and characters worried about things that like normal people wouldn't worry about, and there were like some relationship dramas where I'm like, you guys should be worried about other things right now, or I mean, just some logical inconsistencies. So it was, I felt like they sort of tricked an audience into believing that it was more of an adult story because of the effects and gore. And,
are probably good, right?
Right, and also, the gore effects are great, so we were like, okay, so that makes it like as a TVMA, it's all that, so that makes it, an acceptable horror show, and I disagree entirely.
Yeah, because I'm sure you can make something without gore.
Yeah.
Like, what you're restricted with, you can make something equally good without having to go, like, super disgusting with it.
Yeah, so I mentioned this before, but Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, I love that until the last episode or two. I think it got a bit too hokey, but until then, that basically had no gore, unless I'm forgetting a scene or two. It was more based on paranormal and ghosts and all that. And it had some jump scares, which makes it a bit more whatever than Channel Zero. But that had characters that, at least to me, felt genuine, and situations to me which felt like it felt like they were taking it seriously. So I did really respect that. I don't think it went nearly as deep as Channel Zero, or with head on trying to tackle such difficult subject matters and trying to inspire such difficult conversations amongst the viewers. But I feel like that was one example of a solid TV show.
I'll have to watch it if we get quarantined. I'll probably watch that.
Yeah, just turn it off on episode 8 and you'll be good.
That's all I need.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Just imagine the rest.
Just like my one friend tells me, after Halloween 3, you don't need to watch the rest.
Yep.
Which again would be. That's the thing with the fan bases. So like with the Halloween 3 instance, where they tried, like you had Halloween 1 and 2, and then you had Halloween 3, which had nothing to do with the first Halloween. They showed a brief fun thing, but like they tried to make an anthology series, but it just didn't work. So I feel like in an alternate timeline, that could be successful.
I would have preferred that. I had a whole episode talking about Halloween and where it could have gone, and I mean, I wish I lived on that timeline because I would have preferred that to.
That's what this offers. Yeah. I heard rumors that Channel Zero was gonna start connecting the universes, which would have been shitty. But for now, what we have, Channel Zero could possibly be like the timeline where John Carpenter gave us the anthology series, where Channel Zero is that anthology series we wanted. Where like Creepshow anthology series, but
I still have to watch the Creepshow series.
I gave the TV show a chance. It's okay. It doesn't have the full charm of the movie, but it's decent enough for what we have.
Okay.
Like, it's still Creepshow, like, except for Creepshow 2. I know there's fans out there, but I'll always be first Creepshow fan.
No, I'm a Creepshow 1 guy as well. So
but so the TV show does give some fun to like. It gives you the reminiscence of the first movie, but again, it's just a strict anthology show. They're not connected in any way. It's just you're reading a comic book. That's it, and that's what we should be offered a lot of times. Where I understand Marvel did the cinematic universe. It was great for what it is. Universal Monsters is trying to do that. It failed thanks to Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we just don't need a cinematic universe. We just need stories. That's
right. It. No, I totally agree. And I'm incredibly grateful we have this, even if it was cut a little short. But I'm very grateful that we have these 4 seasons. It still is a lot of content.
Future creators can make shows like this. Like,
yeah, I agree.
That they know you have excellent source material online. Give the credit, obviously, where it's deserved. And then when you make the show, you can create something with limited standards that you have, with the story and the content. What you're allowed with, you're allowed to make. You can make great things.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect note to end on, unless you had
I'm
anything else. Yeah, no, I mean, that was a very extensive episode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again for coming on, Dave. It was we're elbowing now because of the pandemic that's happening. Otherwise, we would hug on screen.
If you watch this in 2 years, we're going through a pandemic.
Yeah, and it's that's why we're elbowing. But thank you guys so much again for tuning in to Feed the Dark. Once again, I'm your host, Evan Rieger. You can find me on YouTube eventually when this airs, Libsyn, Apple Music, and Spotify. All right, see you guys later.